They say weddings are about love, family, unity. For me, it became the day I cut my last tether. I poured nearly $48,000 into crafting every detail of that weekend. Private shuttles, a luxury lakeside villa, orchids flown in from Jamaica. My relatives were supposed to travel from every corner of the country to Valemont Hills, a quiet city where I'd build a life far from the chaos they left behind. Or so I believed. When I stepped into the sunlight outside St. Aurelia's Chapel downtown, the string quartet didn't stop because it was their cue. They stopped because half the front row was empty. No parents, no brother, no aunts, uncles, or cousins. Only strangers and the friends I'd chosen as family. Then came the sound I can't forget, the soft buzz of my phone. A photo. My mother, father, and brother Dion, skin glowing in the island sun, drinking cocktails beneath a Barbados sunset. The caption read, "Didn't feel right celebrating a mistake in white." A mistake. They'd never said it directly, but they'd whispered it all my life through gestures like this. What they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that the man waiting for me at the altar, Malik Harris, wasn't some fallback option or last resort. Malik was the CEO of a $5.1 billion digital security firm, a man powerful enough to shape the future but humble enough not to flaunt it. He chose calm over spectacle. And he chose me. So after the vows, the tears, the cake, and dancing with those who actually showed up, I posted a photo. No caption. Just a picture of his hand on mine, the glint of a deep blue diamond. By midnight, their silence cracked, not with apologies, but with frantic attempts to backpedal. But the door was already closing. I'm Elise Carter, 31, founder of a boutique strategy agency in Valemont Hills, the kind of woman my parents always prayed I'd fail to become. See, I was never the adored child. That was Dion, the golden boy with the easy smile whose average grades were celebrated as potential and whose mistakes were brushed off as charming. Me. I was the grinder. Straight A's, scholarships, awards, all met with shrugs or worse, silence. I remember bringing home a regional art trophy at 13. My father didn't even look up from his laptop. "Don't let it go to your head," he muttered. 2 weeks later, Dion failed his math exam. My mother baked him brownies. It wasn't about fairness. It was about roles. I was there to work, to fix, to succeed without being seen. So I decided early, if I couldn't be loved, I'd be undeniable. And when I fell in love with Malik, I thought, maybe now they'll see me. I wrote heartfelt invitations, paid for everything, upgraded their rooms myself, even had custom robes embroidered with their initials. But they never RSVP'd, never returned calls. I convinced myself they were planning a surprise entrance. That's how starved I was for affection. The night before the wedding, I drove past their house in Brookmar Heights, a suburb that always smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. Their porch light was off, windows dark. They were already gone. I married the love of my life under a sky that felt more like a ceiling. And yet I didn't cry. Not then, because something inside me shifted. They didn't just skip my wedding. They released me. A week after the ceremony, a letter arrived at my parents' old address. It wasn't handwritten or sentimental, just a crisp envelope bearing the name Carter and Sloan Properties, a company I had quietly renamed for this exact purpose. It wasn't addressed to them personally, just current occupants. Inside was a lease. They could stay in the house, my house now, if they agreed to the terms. Market rate rent, nearly double what their old mortgage had been. Monthly inspections, tenant responsibilities, and a list of behavioral clauses I drafted one bitter evening over a glass of wine. No disruptive noise, no heavy drinking, no disturbing the peace. 3 violations, and eviction proceedings would begin. No exceptions, no mercy. They read it in silence. My mother called twice. I let the phone ring. My father emailed, "These are your parents you're doing this to." I replied with one line, "I'm simply enforcing policy." They signed, not because they wanted to, but because no one else would rent to them. Their foreclosure was public. Their credit was wrecked. Pride didn't matter anymore. The choice was humiliation under my rules or homelessness. Every month, they now received automated reminders through the tenant portal. Payment deadlines, inspection check-ins, photo proof of the home's condition. When my mother missed her monthly photo upload, She received an automatic warning, violation recorded, 2 remaining before lease termination. The system worked exactly as I designed it. Neighbors began to whisper. The same ones who once waved at my parents with admiration now saw them dragging trash bins with hunched shoulders. One murmured to another outside the grocery store, "Can you imagine renting your own house from your daughter?" But yes, they could. That's what made it sting. Because every ounce of ice in my veins came from them. Every clause, every alert, every boundary, they had raised me on terms and conditions. Now I returned the favor. When my father emailed about a roof leak, I answered precisely. Per clause 4.2, tenants are responsible for all repairs under $1,200. Submit receipts within 10 days. No reply. Just an uploaded receipt 2 days later. I stared at the notification on my office screen and smiled. This wasn't just retribution. It was theater. It was poetry written in contracts and digital signatures. They had turned my childhood home into a battleground for affection and approval. Now it was a battlefield of invoices and inspection logs. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their landlord, and every creak in those old floorboards now echoed with my name, even if they'd never dare say it out loud. I expected resentment, maybe even whispered threats behind closed doors. What I didn't expect was desperation dressed up as strategy. It started with distant relatives. An uncle I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly called, stumbling through small talk before clearing his throat. "Your mama's been reaching out. She's worried about how this looks, to the community." Translation: she was losing control of the story. Next came a call from a cousin in Georgia, hesitant and full of pauses. He admitted my brother Dion had been spreading rumors. She's on some kind of revenge spree, froze them out, stole the house. Stole. That was the word they were using. I didn't argue. I thanked him and hung up. Then I opened my notes app and started logging names, connections, patterns. Because I knew what was coming next, the smear campaign. 2 weeks later, it was in full swing. My father, once a master of subtle manipulation, began scheduling meetings with an attorney. A friend at the courthouse tipped me off. He was trying to challenge the foreclosure, alleging predatory acquisition. A few filings had already been made. Meanwhile, my mother sought out church leaders, old neighbors, anyone with influence. She painted me as cold, greedy, ungrateful. Dion messaged college acquaintances, hinting that Malik had rescued me from failure, that my company was a facade. But what they didn't know was how airtight my documentation was. Every forged signature, every unauthorized withdrawal, every message dripping with guilt and manipulation, I had archived them all. Stamped, dated, notarized. My legal team responded with a folder so heavy it was nicknamed the Hammer. Within 48 hours, their lawyer withdrew. Still, they tried to save face. My parents whispered about defamation suits. Dion hinted online that I was unstable, jealous, obsessed with proving myself. So I played my next card. Not loudly, not cruelly, just strategically. A local journalist received anonymous tips, screenshots of Dion mocking me in group chats, orchestrating my exclusion from family events. Financial records proving the years of family emergencies that were really exploitation. At the same time, Malik's firm, which they claimed was smoke and mirrors, released a quarterly report showing record-breaking revenue and a new government contract. Their firestorm fizzled before it could even spark. But something shifted in me. I wasn't triumphant. I was exhausted. Because they weren't just cruel. They were incapable of change. And still, I watched with grim fascination as they clawed at the walls of a story I had already written. The truth was, they weren't trying to win me back. They were trying to win back the image of who they once pretended to be. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than losing control of the story. I thought victory would feel cleaner, lighter. But in the weeks after their lawyer backed down, something heavier settled in me. I had spent years preparing for this battle. Every lease clause, every archive message, every calculated move. And now that they had nothing left to throw at me, I should have felt free. Instead, I started waking at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of my high-rise apartment while Malik slept peacefully beside me, wondering, had I become them? Malik knew everything, the betrayals, the years of emotional starvation, but he never tried to fix it. He just stood beside me, steady and calm. One night, when I finally whispered, "What if I'm no better than they are?" His reply was simple. "You were never cruel. You were just surviving." Still, I couldn't shake the weight. So I did something I swore I'd never do. I booked a therapy session. Not because I was unraveling, but because I was afraid I'd never stop fighting ghosts. At first, I hated it. The quiet office, the way her questions cut like scalpels. But my therapist didn't make excuses for them, and she didn't urge me to forgive. She asked only one thing. "What do you want to do with all this power now?" I didn't have an answer. I had turned my pain into leverage, but leverage isn't healing. The breakthrough came in our 5th session. I was retelling one of the old stories, the Christmas when they forgot to buy me gifts because Dion was going through a hard phase. Normally I laughed it off, but this time I cried, not for what they did, but for the girl I had been. The girl who worked so hard, asked for so little, and got nothing in return. That's when it shifted. I stopped seeing them as the enemy. Yes, they were selfish, toxic, cruel. But the real enemy was the voice they left in my head, the one that whispered I would never be enough unless I overperformed. So I made a choice. I began spending less time on the app I'd built to manage their lease, and more time at the nonprofit Malik and I had launched after the wedding. We called it Roots Beyond Blood, a foundation for adults who had been emotionally abandoned by their families. I sat in circles with women whose stories mirrored mine. Most of them didn't want revenge. They just wanted to be seen, heard, held without conditions. For the first time, I didn't need to prove anything. In their eyes, I was already whole. But the folder sat on my desk like a weapon. Thick, tidy, labeled Final Contingency. It contained every move I could still make to destroy what was left of my parents' reputation, bank statements, surveillance notes, even a clause to block them from inheriting if I died unexpectedly. I had perfected it line by line, each page a scalpel. And yet, staring at it, I felt only fatigue. Revenge, I realized, has diminishing returns. My therapist's words lingered. "You've won. But do you know how to stop fighting?" I didn't. That scared me. So when Malik came home that night, still in his work blazer, I simply held up the folder and said, "This is the last move." He looked at it, then at me, and said softly, "Then maybe don't make it." I sat with his words all night. No rage, no plotting, just silence and the rain tapping the glass. By morning, I tore the folder in half. Then again, and again, until it was nothing but a snowstorm of shredded paper in the kitchen trash. Not because they deserve mercy, but because I deserved peace. That night, I wrote a letter, not to them, but to myself. I listed everything I had survived, and at the bottom, I signed it with a single line. I am not their daughter anymore. I am my own creation. 3 years passed. The world outside moved forward, and so did I. Roots Beyond Blood expanded across the country. We opened offices in 7 states, partnered with clinics, and even launched a podcast where survivors shared stories of redefining family. My face was no longer just tied to legal filings or whispered gossip. It appeared on magazine covers, on conference stages, in panel discussions on Capitol Hill. I became a voice for those who had been unseen. And yet, I kept my own life simple. Malik and I bought a house on the edge of West Haven, a quiet town where kids still rode bikes until sunset. We hosted dinners with our chosen family. My best friend Nia became godmother to our daughter. My in-laws called every week just to hear my voice. For the first time, my life didn't run on pain. It ran on joy. But closure has a way of arriving when you stop searching for it. One afternoon, after returning from a speaking event, I found an envelope in the mailbox. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, unsteady. It was from Dion. I didn't open it. I just held it in my hands for a long while, like a relic I no longer needed. Later that night, I told Malik. He asked gently, "Do you want to know what it says?" I shook my head. I don't need his words to validate my healing. He nodded. No pressure, just presence. That weekend, while our daughter played in the yard beneath a golden sky, she turned to me and asked, "Mama, do you have a family like mine?" I knelt beside her, tucked a curl behind her ear and smiled. "I do now. I built mine." And that was the truth. My past didn't disappear, but it no longer owned me. The ashes of what they broke became the soil of what I grew. This life, the laughter, The dinners, the peace. It wasn't a gift. It was my reward. Because I chose to stop bleeding for people who never tried to heal me. And in doing so, I finally became whole.